But the idea of, ooh, how do I love someone who I disagree with and vice versa? Yeah. That's...
A lot of people think that when I get married or I get into this committed relationship, that it's going to make my life easier. Like, it doesn't. It makes it harder. It's like you start adding more people.
Is if you just, I always joke, this is something you must agree to if you'd like to be married.
I know this is your inspiration, by the way, when I wrote this one down.
Okay, good, yeah. You want to be right, you want to be married.
You want to be
that's
right.
A choice
that's
you got to make
Carrieism.
multiple times.
Welcome to Therapist Take Podcast. We're going to talk about Webster's 2024 Word of the Year, so don't go anywhere. Hey, Carrie.
Hey, Josh.
How are you feeling?
I just needed a cough right there.
Try
not to cough right when you were like, hey.
Yeah. That's what we played a game with my kids the other day in the cars. The first one to cough loses. And you could just see, like, all three of us are in there, and we're all just like
your
suffering,
eyes are watering,
right?
Yeah,
you know, like, man, it's been rough.
I know.
It's been rough. So so anybody that's keeping up with us might realize that we didn't put an episode out last week because I was really down with the flu. I mean, it really kicked my butt. I thought this is actually one I've been wanting to do, but we had all the guests scheduled and everything. So I was like, this would be a good opportunity to do this episode on the Word of the Year, because we've done it. We've done it. I don't know if we necessarily 2 years ago did a podcast on it, but I did a YouTube video on the Word of the Year. But do you remember the last 2 years? Can you remember?
No.
Because they kind of go together.
I bet.
I mean, there's actually on Wikipedia, you can go and you can look to see what all the words of the year are, and there's also they also put out like a list of like the top words for the year.
Okay. Not just the...
Right, but then there's the number one, so that's what we're covering. But it's interesting to go back in time and look and see, what do you think it was like in 2008?
Hope.
Bailout.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool. You can see the history.
Yeah, it tells the story.
Yeah, it is pretty neat. So 2 years ago was gaslighting. And then 2023, authenticity.
Authenticity.
So we get the
extremes.
That sounds pretty neat.
I get that.
Right.
Okay.
So we did do a podcast on that one. So this word of the year is polarization. Probably doesn't surprise us much.
No, it doesn't surprise me.
But I will say, like, I don't think I've Googled the word polarization. What's the last word you remember, like, just Googling? Like, I want to know what that means.
Well, when I read books, I look up words.
Oh, like,
yeah.
The authors use something you don't know.
Yeah. And especially if I'm reading on my phone and it's so easy. You know, if it's really hard and I'm reading the actual book and I have to go to my phone, it's got to be a really word that I'm really...
I've probably been looking up a lot of things related to the stock market.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just trying to understand how the market works, which is something I've really been interested in and paying attention to. But that's also, been in the news a lot lately because of...
Right.
I actually kind of wonder, like, how, if DeepSeek is being Googled a lot right now.
Yeah. I had to look that up.
Well, me too.
In the news. Yeah, I didn't know what that was. Yeah,
I thought it was like... I think one of the top words, either last year or year before, was... fake news was on there. The deep state.
Deep state, yeah.
That word is so weird sounding to me. Like, it sounds like a novel or like some kind of mystery novel, like the deep state. Yeah. So, all right. So we're going to talk about polarization. So I'm going to just cover the housekeeping things real quickly and give an episode breakdown, and then we will dive right into it. So, as usual, if you're listening to or watching this on YouTube, please make sure you have subscribed to our channel. And then if you're listening to this on the audio platforms, please stop what you're doing just for 1 second and go give us a 5-star review. If you haven't done that yet, you need to just do it right now. Stop what you're doing, do it, and go back. It takes 1 second to do, and we really appreciate that. Don't forget to check out the description of the video. But you're going to get more links and resources in the podcast version. So I will kind of take the live version and then edit it up a little bit and kind of condense it down to make it a easier listen or easier watch, because we also put it back on YouTube. And there will be more links in the description or the show notes based on where you're listening to this. So, all right. let's go over the episode breakdown. So we are talking about polarization, and we're going to start out with just by defining polarization. Probably be a good idea. But not only what does it mean, but how it kind of shows up in our daily lives. What does it mean to us? What does it mean to you? The mental health implications of that. So how is this phenomenon of polarization, how does it affect us? How does it affect us in our daily lives, and how we see the world and how we operate, internally and externally, really. And then kind of fine-tuning that a little bit to how does it impact our relational functioning and health. And then we're going to hopefully spend more time than most of the time in the episode just talking about tips of how to navigate those things.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into it then.
Polarization, not the North Pole, South Pole.
I do think that, and I think of polar bears.
I do too.
It's such a negative word, and I'm like,
for such a beautiful imagery.
I know, right?
Polar bears on the
Did you know for the longest time when I was a kid, I didn't think the South Pole had snow in it.
Well, I think it's because you think in contrast. So the North Pole is cold.
Right.
So South must be the opposite, and it's
Right.
like tropical or something, right?
Yeah, well, I was thinking more like hell.
Oh.
Like, nobody lives, people live in tropical locations. I'm like, there's nobody there. I was like, must be terrible down there. And I think Buddy the Elf can back me up on that, because he's like, the South Pole
South
elf.
Pole elves.
Yeah,
I remember that line, yeah.
Yeah, so, but yeah, it's interesting how certain words and certain variations, you're like, all of a sudden takes a negative turn.
It does.
North Pole, great. South Pole, bad.
I know.
Polar bear, good. Polarization, bad.
Yes. Yeah.
Polarization, not so bad when it comes to batteries.
Yeah, nice.
I know, yeah.
Another
Did
wrinkle,
you like that?
Josh. I like that.
I just thought of that.
Good for you.
My brain's working today.
I know.
It's the flu.
It's the flu.
It rejuvenated. It cleaned me out.
It cleaned out the junk. All right. Okay, let's talk about polarization.
Okay, so this is according to Merriam-Webster, because this is Webster's word of the year. That it says it's defined as a division into two sharply distinct opposites, as we just discussed, especially a state in which opinions, beliefs, or interests of a group or society no longer range along the continuum, but become concentrated at opposing extremes. That's a pretty good definition.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think that is definitely fitting. I like how it says, like, there's the group, it no longer ranges along the continuum, which, like, it just is like the bookends of the continuum.
Yeah, it rests on the two ends. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good imagery, I feel like.
Yeah, because that's exactly what it feels like. There's not movement. There's not a little this, a give and take. It's a hard line, right?
So I know that, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about politics or anything like that, because it's not what this is about. We get enough of that in our world. I think we're going to have to talk about it from a political point of view to a degree, because that's kind of why it's the word of the year. But when you hear people say, like, we're so polarized right now, we've never been more divided, and there's a part of me that's like, yeah, I definitely feel that, I get that. Then there's another part of me that's like, is that really how it is? Or is it, have we never been this divided, or are we just now realizing in this stage of our life how divided we are, but we don't have anything to compare it to, so we think we've never been this divided? I mean, I don't know.
I've wondered those questions too. I think I try to look into, like, history.
Right.
Like, we did have a civil war, right? That's pretty polarized. Right, and so
that's pretty polarized.
That's pretty polarized.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that the hard part is it's not apples to apples, right?
Yeah,
and so it's kind of the idea of I do that. I tend to do that when I'm struggling with something. As I try to, where has this existed before? Compare and contrast. But I don't know that I don't think, like I said, that it's the same, because and of course I don't know how to live any other at any other point in time than the one I'm in. But I do think that having platforms where anybody can say anything all the time and there's little to no repercussions
Right.
is a perfect recipe for people being more extreme or not having to adapt.
Right.
Right. So I do think there probably is some validity to the idea this is the most polarized we've ever been because
Right.
of the platforms that are available to us.
Yeah, so I think that's what makes it nuanced.
Right.
So are we really that much divided, more divided than we've ever been? Well, I think you make a case with saying no. The Civil War is probably good evidence of being pretty dang divided. But are we divided in a way that's really nuanced? Yes, because and I think that speaks to like just being in the information age, like you said, and I think it's reasonable to assume that because of the way information is shared in this day and age, that it could be more polarized in a sense, because of that. Like it could have a direct impact, or would, or probably does have a direct impact on, polarization, on how polarized we are. But I will say, like, at this stage of my life, like, it bothers me. Like, it really kind of scares me a little bit.
But I mean, I think I agree. And I also think given what we do, it's going to really hit us on a lot of levels because we work with people that are often polarized.
Sure.
In their relationships, right?
Right.
And so we get up close and personal to what the impact of this is like, right?
Right. And I want to, before we dive into the relational piece of it, let's just talk a little bit about the mental health implications of it. Do you get clients talking about this a lot?
I do.
And like, what do you hear?
I hear people feeling scared. I hear a lot of anger. I hear a lot of feeling marginalized and feeling left out. Not just left out by intentionally being left out. And then that breeds a lot of anxiety and depression. And I hear people, feeling unsure about what to do, right? And so that kind of, that idea of that there's a lot of energy and emotion, but this got nowhere to go, kind of it's churning. And that wears on you. I mean, that's a perfect recipe for intrusive thoughts and an intense amount of activity happening in your brain, but your body feeling stuck.
Right.
Which, we know that the humans hate those
Sure.
contradictions, right?
So relational health implications. So how polarization influences relational dynamics, friendships, romantic partners. What do you think of?
I mean, I think it creates a lot of conflict and distance, and it's what we're seeing in our offices, right? And how do I stay connected to my family member, my partner, if we feel very differently? Not just about political issues, right? But even about, about political issues that then all of a sudden start to feel relational or human issues, right? And
the way things should or shouldn't be done, the way people should or shouldn't operate.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think people are overwhelmed, and it feels very complex.
Yeah. I actually kind of wonder if the mental health implications heavily stem from the relational piece of it.
I think if it was just a concept, it'd be one thing. But the idea of, how do I love someone who I disagree with, and vice versa? Yeah, I think that's a lot of the anxiety and that, like I said, that spinning head but frozen body kind of experience that a lot of people. A lot of people I've been working with have been describing that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what are the two things that you're not supposed to talk about at the dinner table or at Thanksgiving?
Money and politics.
Money and politics, or I was thinking religion and politics. Yeah, religion and politics is what I was thinking of, and money. I don't know. There probably falls on both sides.
I guess in my house it was money and politics, but yeah.
But like on a religious level, for example, like we experience polarization there in relationships. Like what happens as people are starting to change and their ideas and their values are starting to change, which we might think those will fall on the political spectrum where you're talking about, like, I don't see abortion the same way as I did. I don't see marriage the same way as I did, or relationships, or whatever any type of hot topic. But sometimes, like you don't you understand spirituality or God very differently, and
Sure.
that can create a divide, between people.
Yeah, no, I think also when you talk about how does this show up in relationships, people change. And so even if you
Yeah.
try hard to stay the same, you're not going to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the world around you is going to continue. There's so many dynamic
Mm-hmm.
pieces, right? And so you can feel polarized when and what we'll hear in our office is often, well, but we've always agreed this, or we always thought
Mm-hmm.
this, and then someone changed the rules
Mm-hmm.
because someone changed their mind, and
Right.
they can feel abandoned by that change. When it's, as a third party, we can be like, well, yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
you're in a different developmental life stage.
Right.
You don't see that thing the same
Yeah.
way.
So you know how, like, when we first were putting this episode together, I changed the fourth point from benefits to tips that we're going to go over here in just a minute, and I agree. Like when we were talking about it, like there really are no benefits to being polarized. Like
I would have to work real hard to find some, Josh.
right, well, because polarization reflects the bookends, right? It's
Yeah.
like you're no longer on the continuum anymore.
Yeah.
You're resting in the extremes, as
Yeah.
we've talked about. I was thinking of the circumplex model that we learned in grad school, right? And Dave Fournier. I know you're smiling. We always think our old professor, Dave Fournier. But when we are working with couples, one thing that, and I think you and I are in agreement on this, that we're kind of working toward is, as couples are really breaking free of codependent relationships and really trying to establish the relationship will be this the style of relationship that will go the distance,
Right.
for
Endure.
for the duration of their life, is what we would call an interdependent relationship, right? And we often talk about how the first kind of something that we have to do, which is very scary for a couple, is to pull them apart, right? We got to pull you apart. We got to and always think of it as like when you're in that codependent relationship, always think of the interlocking rings that you see on any
Olympics.
Olympics or any marriage seminar that's ever been done,
Oh, yeah,
right?
there's the
You got
two
the two interlocking
wedding
rings,
bands, yeah.
right? And one thing we've often talked about is you got the where they overlap, that represents the marriage or the committed relationship, and the parts that don't overlap represents individuals, and that would be an interdependent relationship.
Right.
But a codependent relationship is like having the rings stacked right on top of each other.
Right.
There are two rings there, but it's really hard to tell where one ends and the other one begins, type thing, right? And so what couples often want us to do is like, help us create this interdependent relationship. Help, start pulling us apart, and we'll say when.
Right.
When you got the sweet spot, we'll stop there. But what I
Right.
always say is like that would be nice, but when you create that codependent relationship, your relationship is spring loaded now. So if we can pull, and once we let go, it just goes right back on top of each other.
Yeah.
So we've got to pull you far enough apart to break the spring,
And then.
and then the decision to come back together is a choice.
Yes.
It's not required, and that's scary because what if someone wants it, another one doesn't,
Yes,
right?
it
And
is.
so I get it, and I talked to him about that it's really scary, and I'm not going to fault anybody. In fact, my preference is to really pace yourself, and it's not a race to the finish line type thing. But the reason why I was going down that whole monologue there is to illustrate that no, I don't see a benefit in the extremes, but I do see opportunity in the pull apart.
Yes, I agree with that.
Right? Like when you create that space, it's like the battery flipped itself over, and they're like,
Oh, yeah, I love
it's like
that
pushing, or
feeling.
the magnet,
The magnets,
the
yeah.
positive and negative, it's pushing
Apart.
against each other now. And one of the things that's been so great about a relationship is butting up against each other, right? I mean, I think it was John Gottman that said that. I think I was listening to him on I think it was Dak Shepard's podcast or something like that. It's like a lot of people think that when I get married or I get into this committed relationship, that it's going to make my life easier. Like it doesn't. It makes it harder. It's like you start adding more people to the mix.
Yeah.
it's more to manage. There's more responsibility, more people to consider, right? It does not make your life easier. It can make it better, but better does not mean easier.
That's right.
It's like
they're not synonyms.
Right. And so, and what makes it? Why do we do it then? Well, if we kind of can get past in general the creation of groups for survival, we do it to grow and mature. And I need you butting up against me. So, because it makes me think differently about things, and if I don't get that, then it can really stunt my growth. Which is why I think it's important for people to realize that the sun doesn't rise on one end of town and set on the other end of town. Right? You need to get out. You need to get out more and see the world and experience what it's like in different settings. And that's true for like city people need to get in the country. Country people need to get in the city. Americans need to get over into a third world country and experience that, not everything is as cush as to realize how cush we really have it.
Yeah, sure.
And that helps us grow. But I think where the problem comes in is when you in response to that pushback, you move into those extremes and you camp out there.
Yeah. Right. Well, we talk about that a lot with when we're working in systems and couples and relationships, right? Of that trading one pathology for the other extreme pathology.
Right.
And you're just as sick, right?
Yeah.
So that's just more polarization. That's going from the extreme left to the extreme right, vice versa, right?
But we see it,
it does happen.
Yeah, because when we really are working with that pull apart, you've seen this happen too, where they really start to embrace it, because reclaiming self and having an identity
is inherent. I really think it's inherent. I think it's something in us that we are drawn to, and once we get a taste of it, we're like, oh yeah.
It sounds a little intoxicating, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think so too. I'm sure if we scan brains, we'd see some.
Right.
I mean, dopamine's got to be kicked up because you keep pursuing it, right?
So I can see the temptation to start to camp out. And so one thing when I'm talking to couples about, I was like, there's a point where, so it's really good. You got to create that space. It's really hard for when, because usually one person goes first, so for the other person, this is very difficult emotionally. And eventually they'll take their turn too. But they like it, right? And I'm like, the true test to know it's real is you got to come back. Because now you need to prove to yourself that the changes that you've made you can maintain in the face of, I hate to say it this way, but in the face of adversity, like the pushback. I'm not saying your partner needs to be, but to know that you're going to do your life differently in the context of your relationship with this, if it's going to be this other person, the same person that you are still, this all began with, I need to now come back and still do life on my terms in this partnership. And I always say that the other person should be doing the same thing. That doesn't mean you don't take the other person's terms into consideration. That would be miserable.
Right.
To just say, no, it's on my terms, forget you, right? But that's where you start, is with, like, I need to know what my terms are, and I'm not just going to toss them aside and do away with them because I want to be in a relationship with you, and that's what's required. Right. It's to know that I can hold on to it. And I think that's why it can get so tempting to stay on those extremes. Because I don't trust myself to be able to manage the emotional conflict it might put me in when I experience that pushback.
So the polarization. Breeds
polarization. Which I mean, if we think about it in politics, is what we see in politics. You go watch a live broadcast of Capitol Hill on one of the Congress sessions. Nobody's asking the other side how they got to the conclusion they got to. All they want to do is discredit the other side. Right? And I'm like, everybody's camping out on these extremes. So it's frustrating. Because it goes against our
Well, yeah, yeah.
our values as therapists
It
and what we're
does.
trying to help people create. So,
Yeah, digging in the heels.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we're ready to talk about these
Yeah, let's talk.
tips.
What do we do with all this?
Okay, so now the question is like, if you're following with us here, you're um, if we're not talking in circles too much and it all makes sense, maybe the tips for navigating a polarized society or polarized relationships or however you're experiencing polarization, which I think will be relational. I really do.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about these different tips. We have 8 of them. There's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I could come up with 10, 12 more of these, to be honest with you. But,
Yeah.
So the first one I have on here is the benefit of the doubt policy, which is when you're experiencing polarization, and also I think this will also help prevent you from being polarized.
I think it goes both ways too.
Right, like doing these tips is how you make sure you're not falling into the trap that you're frustrated with.
Yes, right.
Right?
Right.
That you're not doing the same thing in a different way, basically. And benefit of the doubt policy, like, wouldn't it be nice when you're talking about something that's meaningful to you and how something makes sense to you, that somebody that might disagree with you doesn't assume that you're a horrible person or that you're just wrong in your
Right.
perspective and or you're an idiot or whatever,
Right.
like I think that'd be nice. Like, look, you can disagree with me, but gosh, can't you approach me with like the benefit of the doubt that maybe
Right.
there's something to what I'm saying from my life and life experiences. Like, it might not be the best way, but it's what makes sense to me.
It's a challenge, though. It's easier just to respond to the emotions that you feel. But I think when you just can act from this principle, it creates complexity, which creates pause. Like, hold on. Let me give this person the benefit of the doubt. What would that mean? What would that look like? And your feeling shift when you do this.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like anything, it's a skill. It takes practice.
Yeah. One of the things that to relate this to politics is one thing I can't stand to hear in the media is when someone says this and they say, well, it's clear that you hate America. That's what you got from that? Like that's the conclusion that you come to, is that I must hate America or I must hate freedom. But like relationally, we do the same thing. It's like what's one, Carrie? I'm drawing a blank here.
Oh, well, I hear a lot. Oh, all you care about is sex, right? You're the man, so
there
all
you
you
go.
care about is sex. That's all.
Yeah.
When intimacy is just sex,
Yeah.
right? Or whatever.
Right. And that might be how you feel, but there is a compassionate way to bring up that where you're giving your partner benefit of the doubt.
That's
like saying something like, when you say this or when you do this, I know that you care more about our relationship than it just being about sex, but it feels like that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's how it's done,
Right.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't mean you have to just ignore your feelings
No, it doesn't.
on it.
Right.
But there's a way to do it.
That's right. You acknowledge it, yeah.
And if you're thinking about this in terms of people you're disagreeing with politically, try to give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe if you were, and this is going to get into another one here in a little bit, but maybe if you were to dive into their story a little bit, you still might disagree with their view, but you might be able to see how they got there.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, okay, like, and maybe if I went through the same things in life, I would feel and believe the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2, prioritize self-respect and relational well-being over being right.
Well, this one is I always joke, this is something you must agree to if you'd like to be married.
I know, this is your inspiration, by the way, when I wrote this one down.
Okay, good, yeah. You want to be right or you want to be married?
You want to be
That's
right?
a choice
That's
you
a
got to make
Carrieism.
multiple times.
Is that from you, or did you hear that from someone else?
No, I'm sure I heard it somewhere.
We'll just say it's from you for now.
I don't
Until we know for sure.
Josh,
I'm calling that a Carrieism.
Your research methods is in me screaming, no.
Does anything come from anybody?
No, true. Right. I know.
But yeah, so I was thinking about this too, is This is kind of the simplified version because I was trying to fit it on these, on the screen where you guys could read it. But the way I would say it though is you prioritize whatever relationship you're in, you prioritize that relationship above being right, but not above self-respect.
I agree with that. I think that's I think adding that self-respect piece is really important. Yeah.
Yeah. So because that means there's a limit to because if somebody isn't willing to budge from an extreme, that probably is going to affect the relationship.
Right.
And you can't, out of self-respect, you can't just
Keep prioritizing the relationship.
Right. Which by the way, for couples, that's how codependent relationships get created.
That's right.
Where the relationship is prioritized over your own self-respect. And so
You can't do that.
so we don't want you to compromise your self-respect, but do you need to be right? I mean, how important is that relationship to you? And so
that's a hard question. It's a hard thing to.
Well, I think it's one you got. It's not a rhetorical question.
I know.
Like there are some relationships I'd rather be right in than keep that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Sure.
But they're definitely based upon the relationships. There are some that aren't worth it to me to be right in the sense of like I need, but there's also like where self-respect comes in. Like I can't not say something and maintain my self-respect if I don't. And at that point, I just have to put it at risk.
Yeah.
And just hope the other party values the relationship enough to say, "Oh, hey,
I hear
right,
that. Right,
for sure." Okay, avoid black and white thinking.
If there's one thing I wish the gift that we could give everyone, it's avoiding black and white thinking.
Doing sometimes I envy.
It's be so simple, right?
I was just like everything's so complicated to therapists, right? Everything's so complex, and
we can talk ourselves
sometimes
in
like
circles
I
and
just
circles.
like wish I could just be like, no, this is how it should be.
Yeah, I'm convicted in it. I have no struggles. Yeah, I can't see the other side at all.
Complicated. And I've said for years, like if you want to get me to stop listening to you, just tell me it's simple.
Sell me simplicity and certainty.
Right. If you go, Josh, listen, it's simple.
All you got to do
I'm probably done listening at that point. Because like, it's not simple.
It's not simple.
I'm not saying that we don't need to simplify things sometimes so we can function. Like that's one of the things we've talked about. There's probably hard living, like our poor children living with us.
I know, our poor children. You just avoided black and white thinking, even with your black and white thinking. Did you
Carrie, my head's going to explode. You take me down that road.
I know. Right, but what we're introducing here is that you're, learning to tolerate some uncertainty.
Right.
Reflects mental health.
Yeah.
Right, so if we can start to categorize it as, the trade-off of certainty is that I'm not quite as convicted and it feels uncomfortable, but maybe if I can start to tell myself that's because I'm, kind of shedding some ignorance. Okay, I think, maybe we can prioritize that a little bit.
I agree. A really good book for this one Hannah, I think if you can put it up on screen, is every time I do this, think again. I know what it is, and I can't think of it because I know I'm supposed to say it. I'm supposed to remember it.
Think Again by
Adam Grant. Think Again by Adam Grant. If there is, look, I love the Will Smith book. I love that book.
Yes.
But if I had to pick a book that everybody should read, I would pick this book over that book.
Okay.
And you know how much I love that.
I do. I know that.
Because everybody should read that book.
Picking up the weight of what you're saying.
But this book is perfect. It came right at the right time.
Yeah.
Think Again by Adam Grant. I think I even put a link to it in the description. Okay. Number 4 is Find Common Ground.
Yeah. I agree with this.
Look, I think I'm not saying it's this way every time, but I really do believe that you're going to find that you agree on more things with most people than you disagree on.
Yeah.
No, I think that's the case for the most part. But even when you're operating with people that or you're engaging with people that seemingly have moved into these extremes, there's still some. It just might not be. It might be a little more difficult to find, but there's still some common ground there somewhere.
And I think that what's embedded in these tips that I think we should say explicitly is that these things are all much easier to do if you're actually in physical proximity with people, right? And
Oh,
so
yeah.
finding common ground with someone that you're looking at, you're sharing space with, or whatever, it's just so much easier than trying to find common ground with a talking head on
Right.
some kind of platform,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And so this is more geared probably towards relationships or people that are more meaningful to you,
Yeah.
right? When we talk about working with polarization.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I agree. And to kind of, disclaimer there too, like this does not mean that you got to factor in self-respect there too.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to just find common ground as a way to just dismiss a real problem.
No, and it needs to be
You know,
authentic common ground. Don't
right?
be playing nice or whatever. All of this is based on authenticity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. All right, number 5, just good boundaries.
Yeah, always.
I mean, yeah. So, and kind of what I was thinking about with these boundaries is knowing what you can tolerate. So like, all right, I'm working hard to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm trying hard to not get caught up in black and white thinking. I'm trying to find some common ground, but like you can also kind of just be done with the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Because at some point you're going to get exhausted, and then it's going to be harder to do these things. So I think this is where, like, going back to episode 10 of our podcast, which is self-awareness with Whitney.
Okay.
Whitney came on and did the 3 channels of self-awareness, like having enough self-awareness to know, like, how, like, your body is responding in what you need to do to tend to it.
That's right. Yeah, and being able to put the boundaries around that. Like, oh, today's not the day for this. I'm too tired or hungry or I had the flu or right. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do this today.
Yep.
But again, you can be nice about it.
Yeah,
You do it.
you own it. It's about you. It's not about them.
Can
in
we
that
not talk
moment.
about this anymore?
Right. Right.
Be funny. Make a joke.
Sure.
And my mom's really good at that, by the way. Well, she's good at the setting boundaries around political discussion.
Oh.
Her tact isn't so great,
Oh.
but it's funny to me.
Okay.
Because I'll just keep talking about it just to mess with her.
You're not respecting her.
Well, the funny thing is that she'll. I'll have to send this part to her just to mess with her, but she'll say. She'll make some. I'll ask her about something political or something. It'll kind of get her a little fired up, and then she'll get fired up, and then she'll say her piece on it, and then she'll realize she's fired up, and then she's like, "But I don't want to talk about this stuff. I don't." And I was like, "Oh, I'm bringing it up next time."
Yeah.
This is fun for me. She cracks me up.
What a son.
That's why we're here. Mess with our mothers.
That's true. And vice versa. I get to mess with mine too.
Yeah.
My kids. I know. Well, the next one is a little different than being facetious with your mother, right?
Yeah.
Be curious and not judgmental, which this is just a good way to live life, right?
Yeah.
To really try and foster curiosity, to suspend, having a resting opinion or, to dig your heels in about a perspective and
Right.
To be curious. And this is definitely, how often are we talking about this in our office?
A lot. It's so vulnerable.
How often are we redirecting? Ask more about that. I'm curious about that. How is that? Tell me more about that.
Yeah,
Ask your partner to, would you be willing to share this?
I think it comes from, again, a great author, great book, Hal Runkle, who wrote Scream-Free Parenting, and he wrote Scream-Free Marriage. A couple tools that I still use to this day with clients is commit these words to memory, or these phrases. Tell me more. Help me understand. And then I'll illustrate that for couples, like when you feel like your partner is saying that you're just a no good piece of crap, giving them the benefit of the doubt. They're probably not saying that, but that's how it feels. They're saying you're telling me, I'm supposed to say, tell me more about that. I'm like, yes.
Lean into that.
I'm like, yes, that is what you're supposed to do. It's so vulnerable, though.
Yes, it is.
Like, what happens if by my curiosity, I feel is happening is validated?
Yeah.
as true, as right. Like, what if I feel like that you're basically not a good person, and then you start telling me more, and then you verify it that this person, and then now what am I supposed to do with that?
Now I have to change everything.
But the other side is true too. Like, what if what they start saying makes sense to me? And then what am I supposed to do with how I'm thinking and feeling about this particular thing?
So change is required.
Yeah. So it's easier to
be judgmental.
To be judgmental and not curious, right? Yeah. It's path least resistance for sure.
Right.
So get curious. Like you're facing that. Like start asking questions and like what's the harm?
Yeah.
I mean, ask questions and this kind of leads us into the seventh one, which is aim to change hearts, not minds. Like you're not if you kind of understand that most of the time you are not going to change somebody's mind. Most of the time when someone changes their mind on some political or religious thing or value thing, it's because they've had enough experiences or a big experience related to something that really got them thinking. It's usually not because, that thing Carrie said, I just couldn't stop thinking about that. I'm not saying that couldn't happen.
Yeah, but I don't think that's most of the time.
No.
Yeah.
But what you can do, how many times are you like, I really like that this person that in our disagreement, like I really felt like they heard me, they listened, they connected, they didn't judge me.
Right.
Treated me with respect. And even though I know that they feel or believe differently, they sat and they listened to me. Like maybe they're not so bad, right? Like can you focus? The objective is right. Change hearts, not minds. Yeah. Like, let people have a different experience with you. Like, gift them the experience with you that you wish they would gift to you.
Yeah.
You might not get it still, but you might also be surprised. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. Express gratitude for your differences. So.
It's hard.
I condensed that a little bit too because the first thing you really got to do is this is where I was thinking about authenticity. You can't just blow smoke.
No.
Right?
You can't say, I really like that. I appreciate that if you don't.
Right.
Yeah. But I think this is also...
Our kids do that all the time.
I know.
But I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. Yes, they do.
I'm not really sorry.
But speaking of kids, like I've talked to my kids from the very beginning of their lives about things like difference and how boring would the world be if everybody was the same. And since they're not babies anymore, like they go through life like that, right? And so I heard them say things like, well, that's great because it'd be so boring if we were all the same, right? And it's really neat to see. I hope that that's a perspective that lends them to being curious, right?
Right, yeah.
And lends, the idea of trying to understand hearts and not just minds. But I don't think it's easy to find gratitude. I think you have to feel safe probably first to be able to find, the gratitude in the differences. And so maybe some of these other tips before this tip are kind of establishing a little bit of safety so that you can get to this place.
If you are able to say that I'm just having trouble finding something to be grateful about with any particular situation, be grateful for your ability to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, well, I feel like that we did a pretty good job with
solving
the word of
polarization.
Well, no. I mean, just like this is, we're at the mercy of whatever Webster's word of the year is to talk about, and so it makes me feel a little vulnerable.
Just to take it on.
Just to take it on and try to, make it, kind of how does this fit with what we do. But I'm waiting for the year where it's like, if next year it's something like DeepSeek or something, we're just going to probably not do it or something. Like, I was like, because when I was looking through the list for the last 20 years, I was like, there probably were some that would have been very difficult for us to make a podcast episode out of.
We don't have to do it. We're not.
So I do like doing it though.
Yeah, I like it. I like knowing it, but.
Yeah, I think, and if it fits, we'll keep doing it. But if it's like DeepSeek or Riz.
We could talk about Riz.
We could probably do that one.
We could talk about Riz,
Riz or any of those. What's the latest one? crashing out.
Oh yeah, my kids say that. Yeah.
I crashed out on my kids, telling my wife that she crashed out on them. I was like, "What do you mean she crashed? She said, Mom, stop crashing out." I'm like, "What does that even mean?"
I know.
It means she's. Oh no, you didn't. You didn't just tell your mom to not crash out on you.
That's funny.
No, if I didn't find myself using it.
Of course, I know it happens.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, supporting our podcast. Again, please subscribe to our channel. Give us a 5-star review if you made it this far. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you back next time.